And we are live.
All right. Um, what shall I say? Good afternoon, everybody. Well, that's for the people who are here in Europe. But good morning, Woody, as you are at the other side of the globe, 8 a.m. in the morning, enjoying your breakfast for a podcast. Isn't that great?
Yeah.
Yeah. Technology, right? Awesome.
Yeah, I
So,
love it.
yeah, good. I'm super thrilled to have you here and to have a talk with you about all kinds of stuff in your fields of expertise. And my name is Roland Flem. I'm from Organizational Topologies, which is a concept that we've created, Alexei Kravitsky and I. And recently, Craig Larman has joined us in our endeavor to improve the world. And our endeavor to improve the world consists of a thinking tool that we've created to try to help people to better understand organizational design and the path towards adaptive organizations. And we think, especially in this time of era that we live in, where new tooling like AI is revolutionizing our world, the need for an adaptive organization to, well, to make best use of these AI tools and to make this human-centric organization, even with AI. For that purpose, we think Org Topologies is an extremely good thinking tool. But that's enough for the commercial break on orthopologies. Let's hear about Woody. Can you please give a short introduction about yourself and share with our listeners and maybe viewers what you're all about? For those who
Sure.
don't know you.
Well, I'm known for what we used to call mob programming, which I'm currently calling software teaming, although I don't really care what anybody calls it. It's just the overall idea is all of the work we do requires that we somehow collaborate with others. So let's get good at collaborating, whatever that takes and whatever you want to call it. I have been doing software development for over 40 years.
Mhm,
Although I got a late start. I didn't start programming until I was 30 years old. But the industry I was in at the time, which was graphics and advertising design and signage and things like that, was clearly going to be affected by computers. And I thought I'd better learn about computers. And I had a little tech background, but not much. So
mhm.
I started learning to use computers and realizing the software I wanted didn't work very well. And so I started learning to write software. So I've been doing that for quite a while. There we go. In the late 1990s, I switched my career from the advertising and signage stuff I was doing into being a software developer for within companies, working as a developer, but also often being elevated to being a team lead or some kind of management. And I've been doing management sort of things all my life. I owned my first business, real business, in boy, I don't remember what year, but it would have been like 1969 or 1970, somewhere like back then. So I've been doing business all my life. I hired a couple kids at school, took them around and put landscaping in and mowed lawns for people. So I've got some kind of background in management that goes back, over 50 years. So there we go. That's probably enough of a background about me.
All right. Um, so we cannot talk about mob programming anymore. What was the
All
first
you
thing?
want to. You call it anything you want. I don't mind what I changed my thinking about it a little bit,
Yeah.
and why I call it software teaming, and we can cover that if you want. But
Well, yeah.
it's just go
Let's
ahead.
first maybe for those who are really new, although you can't imagine, for how long does it exist already? This mob programming concept. When would you say it was
Yeah,
coined?
yeah. When it originated, the terminology somewhere around 2001, and that's not something I did.
Uh-huh.
That was a couple guys, I think a couple people that worked at ThoughtWorks, and they
Uh-huh.
had written an article that was in the for the Extreme Programming Conference that year, and they mentioned it. They called it mob programming, and they described their experience of maybe 10 or 15 sessions where they all worked as a team. It just
Hmm.
by 2011 when I started doing it. So the basic idea is 5 or 6 people sitting together at one computer, and it can be more people. We had up to 14, but 5 or 6 or more people sitting at one computer working together on the same thing at the same time in the same space. And this allows us to be focused and in the same cognitive space, staying in the same context. So, talking about things, discussing those things, trying things, watching it
Hmm.
evolve, it's all done together. So, we don't have to have follow up meetings all the time to try and explain what we did, which never worked very well. And so, that's the basic idea. People sitting together doing software development, all sitting together.
There's just this introduction, and there's a ton of things popping up in my brain already. And now I need
Sure.
to select what next to say. Oh man!
Yeah, no problem. That's great because I mean we've got enough material to cover days of interviews. So
All right,
let's whatever you want to cover, that's what we'll do.
good. Well, then the first thing that I want to cover is people are in this call because they know probably about org topologies, because that way we advertised that we would be talking to you.
Sure.
So now that we had the short introduction on mob programming, one of the things that you said was focusing at the same time on the same thing in the same space.
Right.
And actually, if I think about it, this is exactly what we are proposing with an adaptive org design.
Great.
Instead of having isolated islands and people doing things, handing off, needing meetings to communicate with others, managing dependencies or whatever, why why not just all work at the same time at the same thing? All right, this will
Yes,
reduce complexity of the organizations.
that's right.
Yeah. So
So
actually,
the key there is the word work. In other
yeah,
words, a lot of times what a meeting about is about talking about the work, not doing the work. There's a big difference there. So a lot of, I'm a big fan of Deming. I'm not saying like he's the one source, but he shared a lot of important things.
yeah,
A lot of
sure.
times, what we attempt to do is solve problems in management. As managers, we're attempting to solve problems, and I think the big problem that management often sees that they need to try to solve is that it's hard to manage things. So that becomes their focus. And I would say that, that's sort of backwards. So we think that the problem is that it's hard to manage things. We need to make it easier to manage things. But in my point of view, or from my perspective, the difficult thing is actually getting the right things done. And so we should make it easy for people to get the right things done. Make it easy for them to be effective in their work, which is the opposite of making it easy to manage those things.
Yeah,
So this is
exactly.
a big problem with
Yeah.
management. In my opinion, I call this, the problem with management.
But on the other hand, management has good intent, and I think they are trying to. Yeah, well, you're smiling like it's not true, but it's true.
I don't think it is, but go ahead. I'll accept any argument. Let's hear it.
Well, I assume everybody has good intent to start with.
Sure,
And I think management wants to try to create an organization that can thrive, and that is a space for people to collaborate to produce some kind of value because they have an ambition, and that ambition needs something to be done. And well, they try to set up the space in such a way that they think, from what their knowledge is about how to get things organized, is the best way to make people collaborate to produce value,
sure.
and at the same time have some kind of information feedback going about how we are progressing and what needs to be done next, and to be able to take some kind of decision along the way to steer
Yeah, so I
towards
would
that goal.
argue all of those are actually hampering our ability to get the
Oh,
effects that we want rather than helping it. So having good intention, and maybe I'll end up quoting Deming too much, but good intentions are not going to help us here. So we really need to figure something out here. This is way more uh, what we want. There's a quote from Douglas Adams. It goes something like this. I may not have gotten where I intended to go, but I ended up where I needed to be.
oh yeah.
And so the issue is our intent is probably mistaken or misplaced in the first place. So that we allow that to drive us is probably problematic. I
Hmm.
could quote people over and over. John Kay wrote the book Obliquity about he's a financial writer for the London Times or something. anyways, he makes this statement in his book that the best path to our goal is the oblique path. But I would extend that out to say our goal is wrong. Whatever we think our goal is we're probably mistaken, and it's going to misguide us in doing whatever it is we need to do. So, yeah, we it's this is system thinking. There's something very different that we
Hmm.
need to a different space we need to be in than most organizations are able to be in. One of again, I'm going back to Deming. He has this thing that he calls, I think it's called like the 16 obstacles, and
Yeah.
one of them is that there is no instant pudding,
Okay.
right? So the important, he says it kind of this way, an important obstacle is that um, we believe that the improvement of quality or productivity and so on is accomplished suddenly, that we can just do some things and we get this. So I'm not really quoting, I'm paraphrasing my memory of what he said, but we want the solution. We go to someone to give us the solution to how to make things better, and that doesn't exist. There is no one size fits all. It's got to be within the organization itself, within the people, and it's about point of view, about attitude. It's about openness, curiosity. It's way more than here's the things you need to do.
Of course.
Yeah,
But let's go back to the fact that we have an organization. So people gather for a purpose.
right.
And you're arguing, well, that purpose is oblique. It's probably, the first idea that we have of what we need to do and why we're together is probably wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, this is a big difficulty already if I'm like an external consultant talking to a possible customer. Um,
Yeah, so what's the goal of the external consultant? Why are they there? This is part of the issue. Is our goal as an external consultant, if I were to be one, is probably counter to what is the right thing to be doing anyways. So this is like I don't mean to be putting too much negativity into this. I think I'm a very
well,
positive person, but what I would say is this: most of what we think that we can bring, we're going to be wrong about. So
hmm
this is
hmm
so again, I think there's a path forward. And it's the things that we started with here. The problem with management is that we want to make it easy to manage things.
yeah.
So the
And
problem
that's
with
not a
the
good optimizing goal for an organization,
that's right.
right? We agree on that.
Exactly. And
Ah,
so and so believing that there is some goal, so it's more important maybe to have a theory of operation or a theory of purpose or something like that than it is to have goals. A lot of times the goals that we have are what's going to drive us to doing the wrong things.
yeah.
If our goal is to somehow, again, I'll quote Deming, it's not about making money. I'm paraphrasing him. And so, his constancy of purpose, which was the first on his list of the
I want a short sidetrack for our
yeah,
frequent listeners. In our
yes,
previous podcast, we had somebody who was trying to break the record for showing the most org topologies maps. He did all kinds of mappings and analysis in one
right.
session. You're going to be the one who's going to break most of Deming quotes in one
Well,
session, I
I
guess.
can cut back on the Deming. I know that. So
No, it's okay. It's okay. It's
I've read
perfect.
all those books, and they've been hard for me to get through. He doesn't particularly write in a way that's easy for me to
Not very
understand.
forgiving, no.
Yeah, I've read of many other people's points of view on it, but the overarching idea is that we tend to have a purpose that is going to be that's going to drive us instead of towards what's really meaningful. Back to the Douglas Adams quote. If we're trying to get to where we intend to go, we're probably going to do the wrong things because we our intention is probably wrong.
Yeah,
We have to move out a couple levels.
yeah,
So if the intention is, for example, an organization to make money, that's really harmful.
yeah.
If the intention is to make the world a better place, we're at least in a lot better space when we're doing that. If our intention is to have a great place for people to work where they can fulfill their what they believe is their purpose in their life, that's probably a much better place to be.
Hmm.
If our place is, if I think we think our goal is to make money, we're going to do things like, Enron or Anderson Consulting, if I'm allowed to mention
The money
company
will
names.
follow if you do the right things, right?
It
That
might.
it
Is it
might.
is it necessary to have the money? I think this is part of the problem. It's we really we're in a messed up world right now
Hmm.
where a lot of people they will find that whatever it is they're going for is going to drive them. The system itself that they've devised to get the goal that they wanted will be counter to their purpose.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and so this is whatever we think we're doing, we think we're right, we think we're going in the right direction.
Hmm.
We've got to really fix that.
So, with all these deep thoughts, how does mob programming contribute to these ideals that you've
So
described?
this is a great direction to move in right now. I often hear people ask a question like this. Well, what problem does mob programming solve?
Exactly.
And so I would say, well, that's similar to asking the question, what problem does water solve? Can you answer that for me? What problem does water solve? This is one of those koans. This is one of those things we should think about. Okay, mob programming isn't there to solve a problem. Mob programming grew out of a realization that almost all the work we do requires that we collaborate with others. Let's get good at collaborating. So mob programming isn't something you bring in to solve a problem. Mob programming is what evolved or emerged out of a team that was realizing that collaboration maybe should be important to us, and us being good at collaborating could be valuable.
I
Now,
like,
again, we didn't invent mob programming as such. As a matter of fact, I've studied this a lot since we started being asked to talk about it almost 15 years ago. And, humans have been collaborating in some form or another since before you could call whatever we were humans. So this is, it's part of what we are capable of, and it may be a reason we exist, that we've found ways to collaborate well. There are others animals that have found ways to collaborate, but we're one of those,
but
and
but
ours
Woody,
is different than most. Yeah,
I've seen many organizations and I've seen a lot of developers and talked to many. So did you, I guess. And
sure.
the idea of um, a developer finding or having the need to collaborate. That's reasonably, I can imagine, right? That happens. They want to collaborate. But going towards from that point towards the point where they say, hey, I think actually coding or the programming effort, the thing that I do, is not an individual task, but is actually working better when we do it as a group.
Right.
Although this idea already exists for years and years and years and years, they are still called modern practices. And in 99% of the companies where they do software development and you go to, they don't do mobbing.
That's right.
So, so there must be something, as you say, people have been collaborating from ever, even before that we will call the humans. There's still something hindering us from getting together and collaborating in that way. And now I want to scope
Yeah,
into software development, right? Like that typical
sure.
type of work.
So
So what's
th
your
this is
idea
a
behind this?
this is a very good point. When I first started doing software development for a living, I'd been already programming for 15 or so years, and I always worked solo. I was always working alone because it was just me. I owned a little company with maybe 10 employees. I wrote software that mostly I would use, or sometimes one of my employees, but I had no one else to code with, design with, conceptualize with. So I worked alone. And then I started working with other people in software development. And the very first contract I had, it was obvious to me that we were working as a team. There was 5 or 6 of us sitting in a single room, and the main guy was actually had his own office, but he often would come in and sit with us, putting things on the whiteboard. So it looked to me like, hey, this is similar to how I would work in other fields I was in. The
Yeah.
the the
Yeah.
business I was in just before this, being advertising, we did a lot of work as a team. If we were screen printing some 20-foot long banners, it's going to take 3 or 4 of us to do that job. It's not a single person job. And a lot of the work, you had to coordinate really well, everything you were doing, not in planning it, which you might need to, but in the actual execution of the work. So here I moved into software development, and we were working as a team most of the time. And then my second contract, that was a very short contract. We accomplished the things they needed to do, and I move on to the next contract. They put me on a team. Now there were 200 developers, and the teams were 5 or 6 people, 7 or 8 people per team. So I got put on one of 20 teams or something, and we sat in the same room, And we never worked as a team. Everybody had their earphone things on, and couldn't even overhear what each other was saying if they were having a conversation. And I started questioning that. I wondered, why did they, first of all, they called us a team. And now that I've been looking at this, that would have been in 1999. I've been looking at this for 25 years. Well, what made a team? In that case, the team was you had the same boss, or manager. You maybe were working on the same
Goal.
features, right? The
Yeah.
specific things and so on. And so, yeah, so I learned quite a bit. Like, this isn't a team. You could think of it as like we're going to play in a band and we get up on stage and everybody's wearing their headphones and playing their own song, right? And so that this isn't a band. This
Right,
is
guys,
something.
on the one. Good, that, good, that,
Yes, right.
good.
It's something very different. Or you could think of it with sports and almost everything I've done in my life, going back to my, like I just mentioned, my first real business,
Mhm.
um, that there was some aspects of teamwork in doing the work. Now, it may be separated between planning the work and doing the work. I don't think that's necessary. My belief is that most of the management of the work can be done by the people doing the work. They're the ones
Exactly.
best in the best
Well,
position to
they
do
know the
that.
work, so
That's right.
right? Yeah.
And then now in software, this brings up a good thing, but just my point being, in 20 in 1999, I realized there was this company where we kind of worked pretty nicely as a team, and
Hmm.
this company where we were supposedly on a team but weren't doing anything like a team. So I
Hmm.
started looking into this and studying it. I had already been learning pair programming by that time, and I could tell pair programming was really a good thing, very worthwhile. And I would end up I guess I could say it this way. I started puzzling why we felt we needed to move into a solo work thing when we're doing software development. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, or a lot of purposes people will say that. One of the things I hear people often say is, I don't think well as a group, in a group. I have to be focused. Okay, does that mean you cannot learn to think well with a group? Or does it mean that you just don't want to, or you didn't try to learn, or whatever? I think part of the problem is we have studied and practiced working alone throughout our school and then throughout our career, and we
Yeah.
never really have learned to think with other people very well. I'm pretty sure almost every kind of work, and I started gathering stories of this when I had to start talking about it, 2011 or 2012. There are many examples of people working as a team in all kinds of work. And so I believe, including
But
software, but many other things. Yeah.
as you say, when you're at school or university, you're
Yeah.
getting these group assignments, and then
Yes.
that's not teamwork. That's like, one 9 times out of 10, it's this horrible setup where nobody really feels like doing this. One
That's
guy is
right.
trying to pull it off, and irritation and stress all over the place, and then you go like, oh,
Yes.
never again. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what we've done is we've put people into a learning situation where
Mhm.
they're under pressure to meet some kind of a goal that is not learning.
Yeah.
So they're not there to learn how to work well together. They're there to learn something else. So let's make a point. I think that learning together is a great way to learn how to work well together. But in most situations in learning together, there's a kind of a pressure that's put on us
Yeah.
to get the work done that we're supposed to be getting done. And in
Yeah.
some cases, like in a university, they might take on an external project that some local nonprofit needs to get done. And so they get together as a team to do that. And here are people who have never practiced working together before. They're working with a brand new team that they've never practiced working with. So let's use an example from music. When I played music as a kid and I wanted to be in bands, and I did try to make my living that way for a while. And I'd gotten good enough with the music I was playing and the genre I was in that somebody could call me up and say, "Hey, our banjo picker can't make it to the gig this Friday. Can you come and fill in for him?" And I could just go do it. We wouldn't
Oh,
even
wow.
need to practice
Cool.
because we all knew the basics of the music. We knew most of the popular songs. I might want to listen to a few of their, if they have any custom personal songs that they do. But we can gather together and quickly we form as a band. And I want to see the same thing in my work, where we're
Yeah.
saying, yeah, our purpose here isn't to accomplish my own goal. Our purpose is to accomplish my goal in concert with the rest of the team. So with the music, I love to pick the banjo. I love to be in front of an audience in those days and making music and entertaining. And so I fulfill that being with the band, but I'm also fulfilling the band's value, the band's purpose, the band's capability. So I can't just, it's not going to be just me. And
All
I
right.
see that in work after work. I'm sure in the medical field, they will often bring together people, to do an operation or something that aren't working constantly every day together,
Hmm.
but they're good at working together. They know how to work
Yeah.
together.
And of course, there's all kinds, different kinds of teams depending on the complexity of the work, et cetera, et
That's
cetera.
right.
I don't want
That's
to go
right.
there. What I like, especially a thing that resonated when what you said was, is the goal of learning together. And I
Yes.
think that goal of learning together to make the bridge towards organizational design, trying to create adaptive organizations.
Yes.
I think the key there is learning.
Yes.
We need to, enable the people, allow the people to learn in whatever direction, because learning together and creates this bigger brain, as I like to call it,
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
that will give possibilities for the whole organization to be, pivoting or being able to maybe, go towards that. Well, maybe not go towards that goal and finally find out why they are there and what they're doing.
Yes.
Yeah,
So this is a good point, is that the back to Douglas Adams quote, we may not have gotten where we intended, but we got
exactly.
where we needed. And so the intent gives us a direction to go in. It is, if it's held as a rigid goal, it will usually become corrupted. So we have
Hmm.
to be very, very careful. So this is why I talk about it's a couple systems out. The system of work itself is very direct.
Yeah.
An example of the system of work was I got to make a sandwich. Okay. So I kind of have I know I'm going to, sandwich means I'm going to have some bread. I'm going to put some kind of spread on it. I'm going to put some meat, some cheese, some vegetables, whatever I do. But that's the work itself. The system of work is sort of innately known in me. But if I own, because I've made sandwiches before and I've seen other people doing it, but if I'm going to do a business of it, I might need to write a formal system of work. This is how we make sandwiches here. So when the customer comes in, they're not going, wait a second, this is different than last time. And, they want the consistency. If I order this sort of a sandwich from you, I'm going to get that same experience I want every time. And
Well,
so there,
possibly you can have a new kind of restaurant where you're being surprised each time with what kind of sandwich you're gonna
yeah,
get this time.
and that's probably okay. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it's like there is different ways to go about doing it. But
But you were
so if
talking about
that's,
the system, the different systems that you
yeah,
see,
so if
right?
that's
Yeah.
your system of work, then you want to change the system of work, then you cannot change a system from within the system.
Hmm.
So a good example is, like I've got an opposable thumb. Most people I think I've met have an opposable thumb. Who invented the opposable thumb, right? Well, I like having opposable thumbs. I'd like to have two opposable thumbs on each hand. Can't we just get that? Well, I can't change that system to make that happen.
Actually, I will want one too.
Yeah, so probably over time, if somebody had an adaptation that made their little finger work more like a thumb, maybe, and it was an advantage, so why do we have hands in the first place? Hands probably exist according to anthropologists or whatever, because we lived in trees and it helped us keep from falling out and getting killed.
But what you're saying
Whatever.
is you need an external system to make these changes over time happen to
Yeah,
make
and
that.
that external system in our case is evolution.
Yeah.
And really in every organization that's true too. So if
Yeah.
we move out, so from the system of work to itself to the system of managing that work or doing that work where we decide how are we going to make the sandwiches. Like we don't want to make it where we're cleaning too much, so we want to figure out how to keep it where everything stays clean while we're doing our work and things like that. So that's moved us out, but that's not really the main system. Overarching maybe a system of purpose. An example is, well, why do we have a sandwich making business? And if why are we making sandwiches? Why don't we just buy ready-made sandwiches and hand those out? So the system of purpose, and there's probably another system outside of that. And I don't know what all these systems would be. I'm not that brilliant, but the point I'm making is we usually try to change the system while working within the system. We really need to step out of the system to do it. So, like
Hmm.
with the sandwich, if they're using spread that's in a jar and they use a knife to get it out and put it on the bread, then they got to clean the knife. They got to get the excess stuff back in the jar. There's food contamination to worry about. So we can't fix that in the making of the sandwich, but we can
Yeah.
reflect on it while we're making the sandwich. And now we're stepping out and saying, let's change how we do this work.
This is a key point because you need to be at least aware when you're working in the system and when you're working with the system.
That's
I think
right.
this is
Yeah.
very important. You know, with the when I'm working with people in organizational change, we need to stop working in the system and take time to reflect, you know, and
Yes.
step out of that system to look at it and see what we've got and what are
Yes.
the system capabilities, what is the thing that is happening here,
Yeah.
and what would be any lever that we could push or pull to, to get it behaving differently, actually.
Yeah, and so that's why I want to move a couple systems out because I would go. I'm not going to quote any particular person, but you'll know
Emmy?
who I'm talking about. Um, he would say that this is tampering. When we pull the levers, we're tampering with the system. We
Yeah.
don't understand the system, and we're going to try things without the correct. He talks about the constancy of purpose. Without the constancy of purpose, so we don't really know what our theory of management is. And when we step out and attempt to pull the levers, we're not going to. So I'll quote Donella Meadows instead. Uh, One of the main purposes of a system, once it's in place, is to perpetuate itself. That's what the system does. No matter what we set in place,
Exactly.
it's not what we set in place.
Mm.
And then she was almost direct quote from here, her, whatever we try to do to change that system will maybe appear to work, but it will actually fail to work. And so we will think we're getting what we want, but we'll be getting something different. And we have to be very, very careful with this.
Well, it has emergent behavior, right? And
It
then
has
the
emergent behavior.
closer you can get to understanding how the system works and how the parts interact,
Yeah.
the better you will be with your experiments to try to get different emergent behavior. I mean, but it's
Yeah.
still it's complexity, so it's not going to be
Yeah.
like fast thinking and done. Hey,
Yeah.
I want to. This is
Sure,
big.
sure.
I want to go back and get small again, into back to the original starting point where we were and meandered off
Yes.
serendipity, I think it is in good
Yes,
English.
absolutely.
So we were talking about this collaboration that people always do, and now we're in the software development world, and actually, we were looking at reasons why people, maybe education, or cultural, or whatever we have in our brains that does not help us immediately to want to collaborate, also not in software design, but may do more work in a solo mode. And currently there's also this idea that doesn't really help us a lot, which is the discussion going on about cognitive load. I don't know if you're aware of that, if you heard
Yeah,
about this.
sure.
So what do you have anything to say about this? Like, how does mobbing influence the cognitive load of developers? If that's the argument that they bring forward, like, no, man.
Well, there were many things that happened for us when we started working this way. So, first of all, we didn't set out to work as a team, although I'd already been experimenting with working as a team, going back to as early as I can remember, maybe 2003, where I was attempting to go beyond pair programming, maybe before that, but influenced by people who would be talking about and sharing these things. Um, So mob programming, software teaming didn't come in to solve problems. It's one of these things that evolved. My attitude, pretty much, and you'll need to help me stay on track to keep from wandering. But my attitude was, first of all, we need to make it easy to do the work. I believe the people that did software development before my time, who were doing it when software development first became something people were able to use in their work, were doing very specific things. It might be a scientist who needed to automate some formulas, and they wouldn't go buy that. They needed to write it themselves. So that partly is, and maybe they were using punch cards or whatever to program with. It was grunt work in a way, and it was sort of, it was almost had to be kind of solo work. And if the project was big enough that I could involve other people, we might then have chances that we could be collaborating. I think we didn't start out thinking that we needed to work alone because I know that I've read uh, Fred Brooks is quoted as somewhere as having said they were doing pair programming in the 1950s. So it didn't and he gives the example of using punch cards
Yeah.
and the higher quality and the better results they were getting from doing that.
Mhm.
But to me, uh, my experiments with working as a team taught me three or four things, and this is the point. If I'm going to represent three heads here. My head is a coder. I've got a QA or tester, and I got a BA or a business expert or a product owner type. And a job I was working on in 2006, we organized ourselves. The team organized itself to have this group of three at the computer at the same time. And what we learned from doing that was that we now have a bigger brain. I don't need to learn everything about where in the code might this be and how do we test it. I don't need to learn about what's the business problem that's broken, we're trying to fix. Those things are part of this larger expanded brain that we have.
Yeah.
And getting that expanded brain really means we can race through things. So we could pick up, in this particular case, we had a application of a couple million lines of code that had a lot of bugs in it that we had sort of inherited. So we started working on these bugs to get rid of, there were 500 open bugs in our list. We would just, instead of prioritizing them, instead of going through them and deciding which is more important to work on, instead of trying to decide, should I do this one instead of that one, or how should I go about it,
You're
have a
naming all
tester
kinds of
review.
wastes, right, around
That's right.
managing the
These are
work.
all the wastes. And
Yeah,
so we got rid of, really, this is the big waste is the queuing or the waiting. And I believe separating people invites those wastes.
absolutely.
So if we just took the first bug off the list, it doesn't matter if it's important or not. It's just something that was in the work backlog. Backlogs, I think, are problematic in the first place. So we pull off the bug, we sat together and we got it fixed. And we got it fixed over and over again. We were fixing something on the order of 4 bugs per day, which previously, the way the team, a much larger team, had been working on it, they were fixing 1 or 2 bugs every couple weeks.
Mhm.
So by getting rid of those wastes, we're moving very directly. So mob programming itself led to, I would say, or working as a team, which we came to call mob programming, working
Mhm.
as a team led to a much more direct way of getting the work done. So we're
Mhm.
solving the problem of queuing, we're solving the problem of context switching, and we're
Mhm.
solving the problem, as you brought up, of the cognitive load. We are
With
focused
that,
on
right? Because there's more.
exactly.
Yeah.
We're working on one thing at a time. Now,
Yeah.
did we set out to solve that any of those problems? We didn't. All we
No.
realized is the problem of queuing. We're saying we're queuing, and that means if you want work on something, then you need to write a document to explain to me what you did. And then I have to take that and try to unravel your document. And forgive me, everybody out there, I don't think I've ever read a document that was as good as me sitting next to the person who wrote it,
Yeah.
ever. And I think the best document writers I've ever worked with, there would still be questions I would have
Of
after I
course.
read their document. I think we need to, this is a signal that we have a problem with the way we're working. And if we're going to have a higher level purpose, one of it is let's tune into the signals in our system.
Hmm.
That's much higher purpose.
I love
So
that. I love that.
if we're gonna be uh, pulling levers, that's the level where we need to be thinking about these things.
Yeah.
It's very problematic when we say, "Oh, let's try this or try that." Now, I'm not belittling anybody's current work. I want to hear everything that's going on, but most of the conference talks I go to is about the specific things that we should be trying to do,
So
and I think that's problematic.
yeah, so like this is brilliant, right? You made my weekend already. Tune into the
Excellent.
yeah, tune into the what was the signals of the system.
The signal.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
waiting is the primary signal. If you
Yeah,
if you do not see waiting, you are
doing
you are really in trouble. So
yeah.
the waiting has to be a signal.
That's
Every
funny.
time there's waiting, now how do we what lever are we going to pull when we see it? That's not the point. The point is being aware and then being curious. Why is
Why do
there
we
waiting
wait?
here? That's why is there
Yeah, of
waiting.
course.
Now,
Yeah.
I heard somebody recently talking about this, and I don't remember where. I'll re-find it at some point, but the basic idea was that if we are waiting, then that is actually a good thing. And the example they gave is if you put in a pull request, and some people in their system use pull requests, that itself is a big smell to me. That's a signal
Yeah.
we've introduced waiting into our system. If
Yeah.
I've made a pull
By
request
default.
and we've made it, that's how our system is. And if somebody else has to pick it out and do that pull request, they need to do the work of a review or whatever, we've automatically created a queue.
Yeah.
And so the way that they had, and I wish I knew who this was to give them credit, that what they said was, if you've made a pull request, you can't work on anything else till the results come back on the pull
Yes.
request.
That's great.
Now, that what that means is we are now going to accentuate the
Yeah.
waiting, because the way we normally solve it, if I ask a group of at a place I'm doing a workshop or speaking at a conference, what do we do when we're in that situation? The answer is always this: we're going to pick up something else to work on while
Yeah.
we're waiting. Well, that right there is the point. You're you are paying attention to the symptom. I'm not busy right now, and not to the problem. I'm
Exactly.
waiting right now.
Yeah.
The work itself is waiting.
Hmm.
It's waiting in a queue, and then you have nothing to do because of it. You're the not the your result is not the problem. Your result is the side effect of the problem. And then we work on the side effect instead. And now, why do we have a long backlog? I worked on a team a couple of years ago, helping them. They had each team had a backlog of like 150 items. That was typical. To me, I can't even fathom that.
Hmm.
It's kind of like, it's
Well, you're locking yourself to, do a series of things instead of being
which you'll
creative
never
and
get to, which you will
no,
never get to,
no,
right?
no, it's
So,
frustrating.
you
Yeah.
have to pay attention. So that's another signal.
Yeah.
Aging
Yeah.
is a signal. If you have something in your queue that's older than, let's say, 3 days, it probably doesn't belong there. Like
Yeah.
if you're working on stuff that's been sitting there a week, I mean, if you have stuff that's sitting there a week, it's gonna waste time. We talk about cognitive overload. My goodness, what are you going to do? Look at that list and prioritize over and over and over again? That
Hmm.
doesn't make sense. It would be like every morning we're going to decide what our menu for the next month is going to be. Every morning we're going to go through every meal we're going to have and decide, well, this is the one, this one's more important
That
than that.
sounds silly. That's what people understand. That's not a
This
clever
is what
thing to
people are
do.
doing. Matter of fact,
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
I could think of 1,000 examples. I don't need to plan for something that's a few days down the road.
Hmm.
We need to understand intent, and we need to. Oh, I'll give you the biggest thing of today. Everybody, just wait. I'm going to tell you the most important point that I want to make. We need to have a good system for steering. This is much better than almost anything else we can do. If I were to give you a free car, I've just got this brand new, the very top electric car in the world. Everybody wants one of these, and I give it to you for free because they forgot to put in the steering. There will be some in value in the parts. There might be some value in the materials, but as a car, that's going to be
No.
useless. Okay, but what if you say, well, I need to steer more frequently than never? Well, how frequently do you want to steer if you own a car or a bicycle? Well, I would say constantly.
Yeah.
Steering. So, what
You
level do we want
cannot
to
you
work?
cannot have the value of the car being transportation from A to B without that
That's
steering
right. Now, that
capability.
might be if there was a track and you might call it a train instead.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you don't need steering with a train, but you get the point.
Yeah.
So I think the big point here, though, is that we need to move out in where we're doing our thinking. This stuff down here will take care of itself.
Yeah.
So I had 3 or 4 goals. When we first started doing this, I didn't go into we need to reduce the cognitive load or that we need to reduce the weighting. Those are things I knew about. We need to know about those things. But what's really important is how do we get the steering? And one of my maxims, or I don't know what the right word is, for myself at that time, 15 so years ago, that I learned was that we need to be really good at making it easy
Hmm.
for people to do the
But
things that will make things better.
there's one
That's what
big
we need
but
to make
here,
it
though.
easier. Yes,
I understand this, and I think many people understand this too, although they maybe cannot oversee the system's layers like the onion,
yes,
and then step back and really see, and grasp
sure,
what to
sure.
do, right? They
I
fight
can't do that
symptoms.
either. Yeah,
The reasons why people fight symptoms are actually often embedded in the structure of the organizational design. I mean, if the three people that you were talking about sitting together to try to solve a problem, these people need to have the freedom to act like that.
that's right.
In a system, what we call resource topology, where people are being rewarded for maximum resource utilization, right?
Right.
This is not going to happen.
That's
because
right.
yeah, so what would your advice be for people who are in more difficult environments and
More
still would love
difficult.
to enjoy this software teaming concept or
So
mob
we're
programming?
always in that. I mean, that's the organization, any organization will devolve into this. There's the concept of like the rise and fall of the of civilizations.
Yeah,
It's just a mini version of it in an organization. At first, there's if we have a halfway decent idea that lets the business get past the first 6 months or a year, if we're just living off of investments, that's going to die pretty quickly anyways.
yeah,
It's got to start generating money, or a lot of organizations are just trying to get to the point where they can be purchased by someone else or go
yeah.
public, whatever it is. Those are counter purposes to
That
making
that
the world a better place.
that concept of the four guys and a dog in a garage having a great idea
That's
and
right.
right, and they all do everything, they collaborate. That's
Yeah.
like the software teaming thing happening
Well,
there.
it kind of is. But the best versions of this stuff will devolve into a dysfunctional organization over time.
Yeah, of
So the
course.
rise and fall kind of goes like this.
Yeah,
We're going to rise until we get to the point where the bureaucracy itself is going to be our downfall. So
yeah,
the purpose of the system stops being what we had hoped to achieve to perpetuating itself. Now,
yeah.
again, I'm not that, I like to think I could be someday a systems thinker, but I do read from the systems thinkers, like I've mentioned.
Mhm.
Some people, he whose name will not be mentioned, but also
You
Donella
can.
Meadows
It's good.
and
We're just counting.
John
It's
Gall.
taking
John Gall is
one
brilliant.
extra.
So John Gall said, invariably, working
Okay, this is going to be the
complex
podcast with most quotes from anybody.
from anybody. John
Sorry.
Gall said
Go on.
the that that a working complex system has invariably evolved from a working simple system. And he takes that a step further to say most simple systems don't work. And that's back to the, evolution. Why do we have an opposing thumb? There was some creature at some point that had a slight advantage in hanging onto the tree branch when there was danger down below, and they perpetuated. And so this is sort of the point. We do tend to every organization will tend to destroy itself eventually.
Yeah.
There's a very
Yeah.
few organizations right now that have been around more than 100 years. Most of them will be 5 to 10 years or whatever. So I didn't have the freedom to work in an organization where everything was great and everybody had we could
So,
do
so,
whatever we thought would be best to do.
so
I
what's the
took that
advice? How do
upon
you get
myself.
how do you
Yeah, I
get
don't
things
have any
going?
advice, but I
Oh,
can tell
okay.
you what I did. I
Yeah,
can tell you what I did.
please do.
I can share what I've done because really I don't know what'll work in anyone else's situation.
Hmm.
And for me, starting in 1999, and I started, that's when I really started working for other people. I started realizing, besides that very first job, which wasn't ideal, but in comparison, it was way better than all the others. I went from contract to contract because in those days, for the first 4 or 5 years of me mostly doing software development, you could easily, they were just, there was so much work to get done, and every organization was looking for somebody to come and help do the work. So you could, you work 6 months here and 3 months there. I was looking for an organization that was really wonderful to work in. And then I'd find a way to stay there. But they were all, I would say, really bad. Some of them
Hmm.
worse than others. Some of them were almost the point of view or the way of working where, look, we're telling you what to do, just get the work done. We don't care that we could do things better here. That was kind of, and why does that happen? I'm not blaming anyone. They're under the pressure to get work done. Now, there's a great paper your listeners or viewers might want to read if they haven't already from Sturm and Repenning, a couple professors at MIT that was written in the year 2000 or 2001. I remember when I first read it, I go, yeah, this is nailing it. Their paper is called Nobody Ever Gets Credit for Solving Problems That Never Happen. You
Wow.
familiar with that? It's a great paper.
Well,
It's
the
a
title
study.
alone.
It's a great. So what they're basically saying is we reward people for getting the work done, for solving the problems. We don't get rewarded for becoming good enough at what we're doing, so we don't have those problems.
Yeah, exactly.
So
It's not
they use
systemic, right? It's not systemic.
that's
Yeah.
exactly, and this is like everywhere I go. I once I read that paper, it gave me a view. This is the point you can see behind me. This is actually a real bookshelf. This is not a picture. This is not a picture of a bookshelf. This is a physical thing. But and a good example, I keep this book Teaming next to me.
Yeah.
Product Development Flow from Reinerson's always right near me. The books from Kent Beck and so on.
Let's
These are important books to me, but 99% of my books are now on my phone because
yeah.
it's much
So
easier to
what
bring them
so,
around
so
with me.
did you now tell already what happened, or how did you get into doing
So no,
mobbing
let's
in
get
these
to that
difficult?
now. So that paper from Sturman and Repenning started me down the track of realizing that what they do, they have another paper that's called the capability trap. It's similar to the utilization trap. So the
Mhm.
capability trap, they use a causal loop diagrams to explain this, but essentially we have so much pressure to get work done that we spend all our time getting the work done instead of making it easier to get the work done.
Yeah.
So this became one of my maxims or whatever is we need to work at making it easy to get the work done
Yeah.
rather than doing the work.
Oh yeah, I love
Sturman
that.
Repenning
Yeah.
actually suggests we should be spending more than half our time making it easier to get our work done
Yeah.
than doing the work. Now, if that's true, which I kind of buy into it, that's something we should do. So what did I do?
Which is
So
going to be revolutionized now by the with AI, hopefully, right?
yeah,
We
it's just
can
we're going to just be faster at being lousy. Yeah. So this is AI is just going to give us an attempt to be worse at what we're doing quicker.
maybe. Well, it
Yeah.
depends. If you what if your organization is already in a mode where they're more systemic into finding, the real good solutions to problems, making their life easier. And if we put AI on top of that, then AI can do more than just become faster. Don't you see?
Yeah, so that
No,
maybe
I see
that
some
would be a
doubts
good
here.
conversation to have, but my feeling right now and my limited experience with AI, which has been pretty much full time now for a while, is that it's just another little tool we can be using. I don't really see it
Okay.
as being any more of a game changer than programming itself was, or the internet, or the doubling of processor speed or memory capabilities every year and a half or whatever it was, and so on and so on.
Mm,
Moore's
mm,
law,
mm.
Metcalfe's law, so on and so on. There's so much to this. I think that it's not a magic thing that's going to make.
Okay,
It's just
let's
something
not
we
go
need,
in
another
that
tool we need
subject
to learn
then.
to use. Yeah,
I
yeah,
think this is
yeah.
a
That's
much more valuable conversation if we then go into the direction of, okay, great. So now you've got this mobbing going on for one team. But how does this scale across an organization where there's 500 people working? Do you
well.
have
How
an
does it?
idea on that?
Sure. Well, again, it's like what problem does water solve? Let's ask it this way: how do you scale 500 individuals? Answer me that. I mean, that's the point. It's
Hmm.
like you're trying to scale. What is it you're trying to scale with working as a team?
Mhm.
What are we trying to scale when we're
The
working with
collaboration to collaborate with a bigger group on problems so that we have an
so
even bigger brain. Will it work? Can you?
maybe I think we just so I have heuristics that I use for these kinds of things.
Mhm.
So but let's wrap up where we were before is how do we get this in an organization? How do we get not mob programming? How do we get the curiosity, the willingness to think about the right things? That's much more
Mhm.
important. I don't care whether people learn to do software teaming or mob programming. What I care is that we need to get good at collaboration. We need to understand the importance of collaboration. I think that's not going to go away with AI. So my thing was, I've never had the freedom in a company to come in and just say, until I had one opportunity or a couple for this, but until those happened, to just say, hey, we're going to do things differently. How do we move from where we're at to where we hope to go?
Mhm.
And or where we need to be. It's we can't know where that is yet. My
Mhm.
one of my ways of doing that was to be looking for the failures in the organization that nobody else wants to take blame for. If you're willing
Okay.
to step up and say, I'll take over that failing project, now everybody else is going to breathe a sigh of relief. Oh, good. Now
Finally, he's
I'm not going
going
to get
to let him have
I'm not
it.
going to get blamed. Yeah, now we can blame him.
Yeah.
That's highly risky. But I was willing to take that risk because it also comes with that the guarantee of the freedom, or else I wouldn't do it. So if somebody says, hey,
Yeah.
we need someone to take over this thing, we want to move all those developers to this new effort, we need to keep maintaining that thing. If I saw it as an opportunity, I would then say, okay, I'll take over that as long as I get to do things the way I want to do them. It gave me the freedom. Now, I knew that if I failed, I was going to get blamed, and maybe that was going to be the end result. But without risk, you have no potential for improvement. So this was my way. So that's one way to do it, but I'm not giving advice. I'm telling you what I did. I had the
Sure.
willingness to be canned, and I have been a few times. Canned means removed from the job. The boss comes in and says, "We don't want you here anymore." And I know in some countries they don't get to tell you that, but here in the US they pretty much can do that in most
Hmm.
organizations.
Hmm.
So now that's only one way. We could do a whole session on that. But you wanted to move in a different direction. I'm willing to do that. What would you like to talk about?
I would like to, because it's already an hour almost. So this is going fast. But
Oh, this
let's
was just
let's
the intro. We're just getting started.
Okay, next session is Friday. Next Friday, five
There
o'clock.
we go.
Listen, Woody, how about this? You're also known for coining or for bringing forward to amplify the good. And when you say, "Hey, I look in an organization to where the biggest problem is, and no, the shittiest problem, and I'll pick it up and see if I can get the freedom to make things work there," that doesn't sound like amplifying the good. That's more like going towards the worst place in the company.
Oh, no.
So,
So that's a good point. But the concept of the turn up of the good is
yeah,
to learn how to see the good in the first place. So the good in this situation was the good was I now will have the freedom. And to give a really good example of that is in that particular case, the example I was giving, I wasn't going to be able to hire a team. So how am I going to get the team to do this work? Is I have to convince people across the company to come work on this failed thing.
yeah,
And so the good for me was this is going to give me the opportunity to get the right people together. So there were three things there, or four things that were really important to me. One was I could ask for and receive the freedom. Look, you got to leave us alone then. Just let us, whatever we do, that's what we're going to do. How am I going to get the people? This is a story slightly modified to make it easier to tell, but I went out to the other managers in the company. I was being elevated to being a manager, so to speak, of this project. And I just went and I asked for who is it you want to get rid of? Who do you want no longer on your team? And I will take them. This is another way. I'm solving their problem. They don't want this person. They're too much trouble. Oh, I can get rid of them without going through the paperwork or any of the problems of getting rid of someone. Why would I want to do that? Well, I'm turning up the good on building a team out of the people other managers don't want. That's because I'm not like the other managers. I know that the other managers are trying to make it easy to manage things instead of easy to do the work. And the employees they want to get rid of are almost always the ones who want to make things better. And
okay.
that's what I ended up with this team. So this has happened to me at least twice, maybe three times,
Hmm.
where that's worked for me. So once again, it's if we're changing directions here, I don't want to belabor this too much, but this is turning up the good. Turning up the good doesn't mean so I'm not out to solve a problem with turning up the good. I want to maybe phrase the problem as an opportunity to turn up the good on something. An easy example for me to have is when we first started working as a team, the only space we could do that was in meeting rooms. So every day we would go from meeting room to meeting room several times. And after a few weeks, how do we turn up the good on this? Well, we could say, well, we have a big problem, and that is we're moving from room to room. But a way to turn up the good is we like having our own computer, our own screen. How can we get more of that? And we find our own room. So
Yeah,
when we set out to solve problems, we often are just introducing our next problem.
yeah. So it's more of a mindset to not try to solve problems and focus on the problem, but more to define what it is that you want that would make your collaboration better.
Yeah,
And
it's just a matter of seeing
yeah.
what we have that's already good and not even having to ask, do we want this?
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
essentially it went like this. What went well today? We would spend 5 minutes a day doing this. So
Hmm.
a big part of this is we are now learning to have a habit. Habits are important. Okay, so at the end of every day, if we're going to do this, we're building a habit. It means we're thinking about it during the day. At the end of the day, if we ask ourselves, well, what went well today? And somebody were to say, oh, well, yes, pair programming was great. Well, what was great about it? Boy, I learned a lot today. How can we turn that up? How can we get more of that? Not saying, what's the result going to be? Not
Hmm.
what goal do we have? is how do we get more of the good we already have? I like to tell it this way. As a child, on Sundays we would have dessert. We didn't get dessert the other days. It's not like nowadays where you just get stuff you want anytime you want. So at the end of the day, on meal on Sunday, we have dessert. And my father, there was six of us kids, would carefully divide the dessert up. So everybody got the same amount. So we're not fighting about it. And then what do you do with your dessert? Do you just hold it? Do you just what do you do with it? Well, you eat it, and you eat it as fast as you can because you don't
Otherwise, your
want your
brothers or sister will get it off your plate.
exactly. And so now you're done with it. Do you say, Mama, Papa, thank you so much for the wonderful dessert. We know that you really made extra effort. No, you say, can I
I want
have more?
more.
Can I have one? Exactly. And so this is the habit I want us to have. Look for the good, sense the good, and ask for more. We are in charge of getting more. It doesn't happen if we delegate that to someone else. So turn up the good is very simple. It's the same as make it easy.
Yeah.
If we think collaboration is a good thing, well, let's make it easy to collaborate. If we think that whatever this thing we had today, if it was pair programming, or maybe it was our tests were really giving us value, be aware of it. It's a signal. The good
Mhm.
things are a signal, and not, just like the waiting is a signal. So if we set out to solve the problem of waiting, we may never solve it. If we set up to turn up the good on the good things that are happening, the waiting might
It
evaporate,
will
and that's what
disappear.
happened to us. So this is the back to what problem is
Good.
water trying to solve? And I think that this is the problem over and over. We're looking for problems to solve them, and we end up messing up our ability to get the good things we could have had. Because the problem with this, the big problem with this, is that we don't know what good we can have. We cannot, if we say that's the good we want to go for, it's going to contaminate itself, and the system will turn into something that doesn't deliver what it is we wanted. We are going about this the wrong way. That's my belief.
Yeah.
It's about purpose. It's about the bigger thing. It's not about the specifics. Maybe we could say it's more about strategy than tactics, but I think they're too closely intertwined to say it that way.
Yeah.
I hope we
All
covered
right.
enough for you today. It was
I
just we
think
scratched the surface
so.
of a
I
few
think so.
ideas, and I want everyone to go away realizing if that old dummy can do something meaningful, I can too. Because it's not about what I did, it's about
Yeah.
what are you going to do with what you just learned. I would kind of put it that way.
I love the ending that we had because we covered some, when we went to look for some stuff and then we talked about
Yes.
all kinds of things. It was
Yeah,
just
this is
like
the thing
picking
of
things,
obliquity. Yeah.
picking things from your brain. So I really like this in, to wrap up this talk that we had. But I
Excellent.
really like the way you were landing back and amplifying this message of turning up the good because I think this is really what we are missing in most organizations, focusing on
Yes,
problem solving all the time, running in like rats in a cage,
that's right.
instead of what's going well now and let's amplify that. I just
Yeah.
love that message.
Yeah, so that
Woody,
yes, thank you.
thank you very much for your sharing with us your beautiful thoughts.
I
And
appreciate that.
maybe we should do it again someday because I enjoyed it
Absolutely.
very much.
Yeah. I'd
Yeah.
love to. I'd love to. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye bye.